aren't all these kind of multi-generational water people around you, I think I would never have broken out of it.
Plus the culture around you, this community.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm curious about, because like in addiction, substance abuse, it also is, what the person brings to it. So, for example, some people get addicted, some people don't. I mean, some drugs are have a stronger hold, but, in a general sense, sometimes, some people just don't get it, and they do the same thing, and they can just walk away when they want to, and they just can come back. And I see also in surfing there are various degrees. I think in the book you had mentioned like someone who doesn't surf all the time might not have that, but I do feel like I have friends who are not able to stop their lives, adult learners who can't change it, and if anything, the lure is still there, like the kind of addiction to want to keep coming back because it's like this thing you're yearning for, you just can't get enough. And I just wonder like what it is. I think you mentioned something about like the isolation of a person or things that have disconnected them from, nature, their bodies, their like whatever it is, like disconnected from their communities for social, political, cultural reasons, whatever it is. But there's this kind of disconnect of like human and their kind of souls or their place in the world. I wondered if you could maybe speak more about, people who are more prone to addiction versus those who aren't, and in terms of surfing specifically. Right.
Well, for sure, the vast majority of people who try hard drugs and alcohol don't become addicts. So that's a very important fact to keep in mind because there's this discourse about drugs and alcohol, like, you do that, you do methamphetamine, you're sunk. That's not true at all. But it's not even true for someone like me at different times of my life. It was at certain times of my life I was particularly vulnerable to it. Same with surfing. I think that people who try surfing and it really connects with them are people who have some kind of sense of dislocation, some kind of relief they're seeking, and they also are getting rewarded at the level of like, oh gosh, look, I couldn't play sports, I couldn't play other sports worth a damn, but I'm getting a lot of good feedback here. I have a knack for this thing. I'm going to stay. So there are a lot of different dimensions to it. It's not just as with drugs. I think the primary thing that's similar is that people are looking for a kind of relief from suffering. They've like, for instance, take the background of Andy Irons. He, of course, he died. It's a little bit controversial whether he actually overdosed on drugs. He had a heart condition, but he was for sure an addict. There's no question about that. And he had a pharmacopoeia in his system when he died. Andy Irons had, a pretty serious learning disorder. He was in classes for kids who, in that day and age, and there's a stigma attached to it. You're in a special ed class. He got a lot of grief for that. He was mocked and teased relentlessly by Bruce.
And Howley in Kauai, too.
And on top of that, he was a Howley boy in a very heavily native Hawaiian community of the North Shore of Kauai. So those are two major social problems he had to deal with. Then his parents got divorced. So there's a third, what they call a childhood trauma, basically, that the more of those that add up, the more the greater likelihood you're going to become an addict. So he's kind of predisposed to take something on that's going to kind of absorb him and immerse him and give him relief from those preoccupations. And we know as surfers how powerfully immersive and purifying and kind of liberating surfing is as an experience. You really do forget your life on shore and what's bugging you, and that totalizing experience is very drug-like, right? So it's not at all surprising for us surfers to think, oh gosh, some of these people are going to become addicts to drug and alcohol because it's on a continuum.
Do you think also, like, particularly like for someone like Andy Irons or even, you know, like people who grow up surfing, because your brain is still developing too. And your neuroreceptors that are developing are higher tolerance almost. You need more serotonin, you need more to get that kind of feeling of newness, that excitement, and regular everyday just doesn't do it for you because you grew up surfing. And then as you become an adult, and let's say you stop surfing as much, or you stop doing certain things, you know, that brought you that joy. Do you think that also could make you predisposed to addiction because of growing up doing these sports?
Yeah, I think that there may well be a connection of like being predisposed to other forms of addiction because you had a taste of surfing addiction, especially as a boy or a girl when you're young. When you're young, the amount of learning you're doing is so enormous. And learning and addiction have been connected through dopamine.
Yeah.
Because with dopamine is the primary chemical for memory and focus and drive. Those are all key for learning. If you don't have the drive to learn, you're not going to really learn it, right?
Right.
With surfing, it's the same thing. With sports, with anything that gives you a dopamine hit. But when you're young and you're getting it, it's very deep. And yeah, you may crave it. You know, there's definitely a sense that it predisposes you to other forms of addiction for sure, and also just the downtime of surfing. Think about it. I don't care where you live. Byron Bay, Kauai, there's a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Well, you can go motocross in the jungle, you can fish, you can snorkel, you can deep dive, but there's also this party culture in surfing. You know, there's that kind of beach boy hedonism.
Yeah.
And that's real, and surfing is countercultural and has that tradition of it as an alternative lifestyle too. So one of the things that goes with surfing addiction is also forfeiting your socioeconomic inheritance, right?
Yeah.
So all the guys I knew growing up whose dad, let's say that, like I'm thinking of my idol when I was like 10 or 11, his dad was a stockbroker. And now he didn't become a stockbroker. He did what he had to do to surf. He's a surfer.
Yeah.
And when you ask him what he is, he's a surfer. And he waits tables. He does what he's got to do. And that's everywhere you go in real hardcore beach communities are all these people who did not cash in on the American dream. And those people are also socially more inclined to look at other ways of, experiencing things. And they're more open to experimentation and drugs, right?
Yeah, yeah. Do you think, what about depression? I feel like, especially if you grow up surfing and things like that and you stop surfing or you don't get to continue it on a regular basis, I feel like that can help spur on certain types of depression. For our listeners, I am going through right now, I've been clinically diagnosed with major depression disorder. And I've been going through a lot of things recently, obviously spurred on by COVID and lots of other things. And I've been self-medicating with marijuana and alcohol. And one of the things that I've been learning through my treatment and therapy and reading your book even is like, oh my gosh, I wonder if me growing up surfing and taking on the daily routines of responsibility and being an adult and not surfing as much and also living on the East Coast helped spur some form of depression. And what I'm trying to get is also make an argument for my wife to let me go surfing more.
As therapy.
As therapy. But I sometimes wonder, and I ask like my counselor, like, is this possible that surfing might have played into my depression because I am not getting that fix as much, and my levels of serotonin are much higher than maybe other people might have.
Your need for it. Yeah. You have to find a substitute. You have to go running or something. You have to get out in the woods and run. You have to do something that's going to do that. But yeah, I think that's quite possible that neurochemistry was altered and you need more of a fix. You definitely sense that with big wave riders.
Yes.
Who get particularly down and blue.
Depressed.
And you think about, how many times does it get 20 foot every year? 5?
Yeah.
7 times a year?
Yeah.
So they're doing a lot of dealing with all that. And you know that the intensity of that experience must really change their neurochemistry.
Look at Kai Lenny. He when he's not surfing 20-foot waves, he's windsurfing, he's foiling, he's inventing new sports. He's doing something constantly. Like I imagine if you were to take him and be like, Kai, we're going to put you in Big Brother house where you can't do these activities for a month or two. I would be curious to see what that effect would have on him.
Yeah, well, that's why I like the approach Flea takes. He's another
Daryl
recovering
Flea
addict.
Verotsko.
Verotsko has a thing called Fleahab. He integrated surfing into it.
Yeah,
surfing as a way to address the whole need for dopamine and the neurochemistry, the good chemistry that you get from drugs, is really powerful.
It's tremendous, and you go about this in the book, even with like how the therapeutic qualities of surfing. I look at, like you talk about the people from the military suffer PTSD, who they take them surfing, walk on water, and all these other programs. And one thing I also found very interesting with that, or I started to think, was with surfing, right? Like it's also, there's a bit of a tribal element. There's a community element. Only a surfer knows the feeling, right? Like from Billabong. And, and I know, but they don't sponsor the show. Sorry. But it is this also knowing. And then I imagine for vets, there's this whole like connection to their platoon, connection to the people, and no one, when they come home, understands them. But surfing is another way for them to connect with other people, maybe who don't have the military experience, but they have the surfing experience. And now they can share on that level, which can be very therapeutic, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't really thought of that aspect of surfing. But the way that they do it in Operation Surf, and is in groups, and they are vets, and they're all learning to surf together as vets, and they think and talk in that way. But the kind of physiology of surf, the way surfing can help people suffering from PTSD is to shake your brain up a bit and get you out of the repetition, the really painful cycling through of a memory or a flashback that's looping through your brain. You're trying to stop it with drugs. You're trying to stop it with sex or gambling or anything to kind of break that cycle. But when you get thrashed by a wave, you can't be thinking, you can't be flashing on that for a few seconds, right? You come up and your brain's been cleared, and then maybe you can catch a wave quickly. You talk to your surf instructor / therapist about it, and this allows the brain to rewrite its signature a bit, just a little bit, and gives you an opening. And this is why this is the thinking around how surfing helps vets with PTSD, and they don't, because nothing else is working. They're open to it, right? It's like with depression in general. There are a lot of people are open to psychedelics now for depression, and surfing for depression because the drugs don't work and the talk therapy doesn't necessarily work. Even things like low forms of electroconvulsive shock therapy have very powerful beneficial effects. And it's not like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest where you're getting lobotomized or shocked to your soul. You're getting just a kind of light series of shocks, and it's a similar thing to a wipeout. It's a similar thing to being shaken. The ancients knew this too. They would give people herbs that caused them to have like convulsions, and that would bring people out of a kind of catatonic depression. And so, psychedelics have a similar power to kind of shake the ego.
Well, and also create new pathways, right?
Right, new pathways, but also to kind of you witness the sort of the death of your ego, and you're freed from it for a bit. And that also opens up for new possibilities in neurochemistry.
Surfing with mushrooms, the new frontier together.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
Probably not that new.
Yeah, exactly. But I
Jock
wonder
Sutherland.
about the this kind of balance. So you have these things that can help create these new neural pathways, but then there's this fine balance between, like just where it doesn't go to the extreme. And I think about like surf culture in general, as far as its modern